Welcome to devMode.fm, a podcast dedicated to the tools, techniques, and technologies. And today we're doing another devMode stand-up that we stream live on YouTube. So if you ever want to catch it live, ask some questions, see us on video, you're welcome to join us. We subscribe to the @devModeFM Twitter handle, and we'll tweet out whenever we're doing that. And away we go. And today, as always, I'm joined by the one, the only, the beater of speedwalkers, Ryan Ireland. How you doing, Ryan?
Hi, Andrew. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. We're having some video problems with you, but your audio is fantastic, right?
Yeah. I was gonna say my voice are better than my looks, but I think that's probably debatable as well. It's good to be back.
Well, you've heard of a face made for radio, right? I guess there's a voice made for literature or something. I don't know.
A voice made for silent movies.
That's great.
Whatever I have, it's all of them. This is what I have.
Well, speaking of speed walking, I want to talk Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
Have you been watching the Olympics at all?
Not in the last week, but I did watch a lot of swimming, which was extremely stressful to watch. And I
stressful.
like,
How was it stressful? You weren't in the pool. What are you talking about?
No, because it's like, I don't know. You just see, sometimes it's just so close. And you're just like,
Yeah.
oh, like, and like, especially on the longer distance swimming.
Yeah.
Like, like these people can barely like catch their breath when they're done. And these are the most highly trained swimmers in the world, in these finals. So I always think it's amazing, but I also think swimming, endurance, when you're those aren't really endurance events, but like that type of swimming, I always think is amazing because I think it's difficult. Like I'll get in the pool and do a couple laps of freestyle and be ready to take a nap. Meanwhile, I'll go run, 10 miles and then continue about my day. But because I think swimming is just way, way harder. And my daughter swims and I think she's actually really good. She's definitely better than me.
A couple laps of freestyle. All I do, Ryan, I cannonball into the pool, and then I swim over
there.
I swim over to one of those little, things that you can lay on, and I just lay on it. But
right.
Usually that doesn't last very long because the kids come over and harass me, and their favorite thing to do is to flip me over in the pool and do all that kind of fun stuff, But we've been watching the Olympics a lot too. Me more than anyone else, I think. But as a family, people have sort of been drawn in and been watching it. And I don't know what it is, man. I just find it amazing, some of these feats that people are able to do. Like I get really inspired when I watch this, when I see these people that have clearly dedicated a huge chunk of their life to getting good at one thing, and that one thing could be just like the guy that has a shot put. So he's got a 16-pound ball that he just throws as far as he can. You know what I mean? And
yep. I mean, yeah, go ahead.
No, finish. Go.
I was going to say that just to that point, that other than the elite of the elite, people that return to the Olympics multiple times, for most people that go to the Olympics, that is the high point of their career. It is everything they've been working towards, typically since they were a kid. And I can't imagine the amount of pressure that they have to either to win or just perform to meet whatever their expectation was. I saw a runner in a track event fall, and it was basically, that was like his shot at running in the Olympics, and he couldn't even, and that's done. And I don't know anything in my life that is really like that. Like if I write some crappy code, I have the opportunity to go back and fix that and redeploy it. So that's what I'm always amazed about. And it's also the years and sometimes decades long dedication in pursuit of one thing. Is it's admirable. I don't know if it's like entirely healthy that if everybody did that.
Sure.
But I still think it's a fascinating example of being truly dedicated and working like deeply and carefully at one thing over and over and over.
And it's just fun to see what people can do, right? So we'll be watching the platform diving, and I'll be putting myself in that spot, and I'll be like, on the first rotation, I'm probably vomiting. You know what I mean? So I'm probably vomiting. My limbs are probably flailing off in all directions, and I'm probably have this horrified look on. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, you look at what they're doing and you're like, holy crap! Like, that is amazing. Like, there's a 14-year-old Chinese lady. What's her name? Chen Si or something like that. I forget her name exactly. But my wife corrected my pronunciation. So well, even if I got it wrong, I'm sure I'm pronouncing it wrong. But man, she scored on a couple of dives. She got 7 10s. Like, every judge gave her a 10 out of 10, and she smashed the Olympic record for scores in that sport. And she's 14, Ryan. 14.
Yeah. Which means if she's able to stay on top of her her craft, she could be in, 18, 22, 2, 3, 4 Olympics, you know, depending. Like, I don't know what the ages are there, but.
And I want to relate this to development, because I was also looking at it and I was like, you know what? There are probably as many different sports in the Olympics as there are, frameworks or that you can use to build a website. You know what I mean? They're all competing for a gold medal. They're all trying to do their thing and win but you don't see the shot put guy being like, you know what? I feel terrible about myself because I don't know how to do the platform diving, But you see that in development, where you'll have, a developer who maybe, okay, let's say they do craft sites or whatever, and then they'll kind of be looking enviously over at a React developer that does what they do. And it's like, no, man, it's okay. Like, you can stay in your lane and you can do your thing. Like, there's nothing wrong with that, right?
Right. Yeah, no, that's a good point.
And I don't think it makes anyone better than the other, or anyone, just because something is newer, sure, it may be more advanced, but it may or may not be the best or the greatest way to do it, right?
Right. I will say, though, that I feel like that we have more freedom for lateral movement than maybe you would in, like, athletics.
For some.
Yeah.
It depends on what it is. Like, they were interviewing the woman from the United States team that won the beach volleyball, or one of the pair. And she was originally a soccer player. And she went, and then her dad sent her to, like, a volleyball training camp, and she's like, I hate it. I don't want to do this anymore. And he's like, well, look, we signed you up. You're staying there for 2 months. We'll reevaluate then. And the next thing you know, she's getting a gold medal for it. I think you're right. Like, there are some sports that there is less.
But she still hates her dad.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, hopefully she's over it and she likes him now. But there are some sports where I think there is lateral movement. Obviously, you gain sort of that general athleticism, right? That you can translate from one to the other. But I think you're right. There probably is a little bit less lateral movement, in that, you can be in really great shape as a soccer player, but it's going to take a lot of training before you can do platform diving, But the athleticism
there are people that
and
are just natural. Yeah. I was going to say, there are people that they're natural athletes, and they're just good at everything that they try. And you see that a lot in college sports. You'll see people that play both football and basketball, and can be on the varsity teams of both, just because they're just natural athletes.
And the training and the discipline that you get out of having to get really good at something athletically will translate even if you're doing a different thing, because you're used to it. You're used to sucking in the beginning and grinding it out and practicing and getting better and being able to do it. And you've built up that general athleticism that kind of translates along the way. And I think that's something that we can keep in mind for development too, right? In that you're getting good at developing in general, and you can move from one environment to another more easily than you think you can, more easily than an Olympic athlete can. So just keep that in mind. You are not a ex-developer. You don't pigeonhole yourself as I only do this,
Right. Like, if right now the only thing you do is write make files all day long for a living, like, then
hey, don't insult me. Don't get this personal talking about my make files. And Matt Wilcox says, my day is finally over. Cheese and port evening are inbound. I'm exceedingly jealous about this right now.
What kind of cheese? I'm curious what kind of cheese
If I lived anywhere near him, I swear to God, I would go over there and I would raid his cheese and port supply. I'd be all over that.
So If his work
and then I would
he must
critically
be
watch
in
the
UK.
Olympics and criticize people for doing terribly while I'm eating my cheese and drinking my port.
So I assume Matt's in the UK.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
And then, so I don't really know much about cheese taste over there, other than what I learned from Wallace and Gromit. That's basically my stupid.
Well, I'm sure it's accurate. If you learned about a country from a cartoon, I'm sure it's right. Right. We might as well just go with whatever stereotype that you have. Yeah. But okay, this is where, and I realize that this is, people are gonna, not gonna like this, but we were watching the Olympic Channel the other day, and what was on there was speed walking, Ryan. I think that's what they call it, speed walking. I'm having a hard time getting behind speed walking, and I see it every 4 years, and I'm still having a hard time getting behind speed walking. I know it's a sport. I know everyone out there is just like, Andrew, your fat ass couldn't do it. These are, I get it. I understand. But I think that they look silly. What do you think?
Well, I mean, every 4 years, the internet is flooded with searches on speed walking rules because everyone wants to know what are the rules. Like, why is this so, it's so, why is it even like an Olympic event?
Yes.
And I think to me, that's like the fascinating part about it is there's probably a set of rules that are not like easy to follow and then also be fast.
I'm sure. I mean, I don't know.
Like with speed walking, I think you always have to have at least 1 foot on the ground at a time.
I know.
And I know that sounds strange, but if you ever watch, if you step frame by frame through like a elite track race or even a marathon, you'll see that they have both feet off at the ground at the same time most of the time.
Yeah. Andrea says the Ministry of Silly Walks. That's exactly what I think of whenever I see it. That stupid Monty Python skit where they're walking as weirdly as they can. I don't know, man. I guess it's the thing about like a sport where you are limited in terms of how fast you can go. It just seems weird to me. It would be like if they had a shot put, but you're only allowed to throw it so far or something. Like, I don't know, just something about it.
I mean, think about like the hurdles though. Yeah. Oh yeah, let's have a race on the track where we put like a metal object or a series of metal objects in front of the person they have to jump over.
That's a useful skill though.
Well, I mean, yeah, maybe. But so
did you ever play Donkey Kong as a kid?
Yes.
Yeah, well, Mario needed to be able to jump over them barrels. You know what I'm saying?
Have you ever come upon a black bear in the woods and you know that you're not supposed to run from a bear, so you can speed walk? It's a good skill.
All right, I'll stop griping about it. It always just strikes me as a little bit weird. I don't know, but I've been enjoying the heck out of the Olympics. I love it whenever they come around and I get to watch them. They're doing things that, I'm washed, Ryan. Like, it's way past my time to be able to do anything like this. Yeah. This is never going to happen. But I still get very inspired by watching it and seeing the things that other people are able to do. I think is incredible. I think it's really cool. Yeah. I love it. I love watching it.
I enjoy a lot watching the running, the track competitions, and then I should know this, but the marathon is also fascinating to me.
Yeah. See, now that's something you could actually participate in, potentially, right? Like, you got a shot at that sport, potentially, of participating if you wanted to.
Oh, it already happened? Let's see.
Yeah. Well, Andrea...
This is so confusing. Go ahead.
Andrea is saying that hurdles, for instance, could be useful for dodging obstacles while evading predators, all that kind of stuff. But you ain't going to do no speed walk away from no predator, okay? You're gonna flat out run, man.
No, you're not supposed to, because then think about if you have a mountain lion, encounter. You're not supposed to run, because at that point you're challenging that mountain lion to chase you down.
Ryan, you live in Austin, Texas.
We have lions.
The only mountain lion you've seen works at Starbucks. I mean, for God's sakes, this is ridiculous. And anyway, my point in all of this is that I get inspired by this. I get inspired to try and do things, Mm-hmm. I get inspired. Like, if they can do this, maybe I can do something cool, I get that. And I just enjoy watching them compete. So every time it comes around, I've really enjoyed it. And then there's also that allegory that I try to keep in my mind of, these are all elite athletes and we are all developers of one form or another. But there is the possibility for us to do different things. We can either get really good at one thing, or we could do the decathlon and do a whole bunch of different things. And I don't know. I just saw some allegories there, but I want to shift, if I could, to talk about you,
Sure.
Ryan.
Oh, all right. Wow.
So my understanding is that you have been doing sort of a little bit of renovation on your baby, which is Craft Quest. Why don't you tell us about what you've been doing?
Yeah. So I basically been taking a beating for the last 6 months or a year from you on getting that converted over to a Docker setup and with a modern build chain. And I finally realized that I needed to actually, for what I wanted to do with that project going forward, I did need to do that. So I figured it out in my own time. But yeah, so I'm converting the whole project over to, it's using your starter project with Vite. And I'm basically spun up a new project for that. And I'm just migrating over all of my stuff into that. So I'm probably like 75% of the way there without all of the optimizations that I want to do. I could do a ton of like front end template changes and refactoring. I'm doing some, but I'm pushing some off till later because the project can't take a year. It has to be done quicker than that because it's blocking me from, and by that I mean like there's all sorts of new features I want to build that would be better built using something like Vue. And so I want to, and I'm already using Tailwind, but I want to get all of that done. So I just have a, sort of a smoother path forward in working on those new features. So it's been interesting to do that. I'm trying to resist doing a lot of refactoring along the way, but I'm doing a little bit as I'm going.
All right. So I got to take issue with you, first of all, Ryan, about a beating. Okay. Really? You've been given a beating? I mostly, the way it seems is I've kind of more played therapist, where you lay down on the couch and you complain about this, that, or the other thing. And I'm like, well, a way out of this might be doing something positive and productive in terms of, renovating and doing this might be an easier thing to do. You make it sound like you have been cudgeled. And I think that's hurtful.
Well,
that's hurtful.
I'm pretty stubborn, and I tried all different ways to get around having to completely like restructure my project because it is a project that's in production with paying customers that generate the revenue that feeds the income that supports me and my family. So I can't just kind of just do this thing that could potentially have sorts of like a domino effect of problems.
But this was my idea a long time ago. The inspiration was from Bob Vila. We could do this old house
site.
And we could do this old site where you can record the renovation of an old site, which is something that everybody has, either their client, their own site, their agency site, their personal site, their client site, something that needs to be modernized, where you got to update the infrastructure so you have something solid that you can build on. I think people would love to see it, as well as it improving your stuff, right?
Yeah, no, yeah, totally. And I need to record it. I still am just kind of cranking away on it in the evenings and weekends, which is kind of funny, since it's what I do full time. But but I mean, it's like even when you do something full time, you have to allocate your time appropriately to different things.
Well, how's it been going? Like, what do you do? Well, okay,
it's actually been really, so it was easier than I thought once I wrap my head around kind of like the framework of the whole thing, like just the pieces, because it's not a project organization that I came up with, so I have to kind of understand how it all works. So it's once I did that and kind of realigned my thinking for how to approach it, then it hasn't been that bad at all. I think that the reason that I put it off for so long, because I I have a hard time doing things for the sake of doing them, like doing them. I think that's where you and I differ a little bit, where like I didn't want to switch to this tool just because it's a good tool to use. I wanted to switch when it actually would give me some like real benefit.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. What are your reasons? Like, what are your...
Oh, so, well, I was, you know, like right next to me here is my whiteboard, and I was planning out features and things I want to do on the site or on, you know, on the product.
Yep.
And then I realized like, oh, like, you know, like this is like where the best tool to implement this would be Vue.
Right.
And then it's like, okay, like I need, like if I'm going to go down that path, I'm not going to start doing any of that until I actually have a modern like build tool set up.
Right.
To work with that. And then that's when I realized like, okay, I can't get to that point until I fix this thing. And so that was then a roadblock. So I was like, now I got to switch.
And Andrea is saying meta work, baby. And yeah, sometimes you got to do the meta work to do the beta work, right?
Yep.
It's got to happen.
Yep, exactly. But, and it's so sort of, you know, ingrained in how I work, which is, I like to get things out and ship things. And then when I'm presented with a roadblock, then I address it and fix it. And it's not always the best way, but it's a way to be able to MVP things and then iterate and get things out in front of people. And it's kind of how I do things. But it's going well. And I'll have to say that because I know you're waiting for your praise.
No. Lies.
It's actually a really good tool. And the setup is really, really nice. It always surprises me, you know, like actually how well it works. And it does.
That sounds like a dig.
No. Not because it's something that you created. Just you know, it's people don't use. I mean, I know some people use tools for no other reason than that it exists, but like something like this, like it actually provides a lot of value, and it makes developing way faster.
Yeah.
So it's been really nice. So I really like it. I think that what you've built with the Vite branch specifically, I haven't worked in the Webpack one. I assume it's the same structure, just a different build tool.
Yeah, that's the whole point of how I did it. Is everything is exactly the same. You just have a different build chain directory. So that's the whole point of making it modular like that. You can just swap one in and out. Yeah. Yeah.
It's really nice. I'm looking forward to the time when I can deploy it. And ideally it should be like a seamless, I mean, there might be a little wrangling here and there, but it should be pretty straightforward. Because if it's working locally for me, it should be fine once I deploy it. And that's another thing, right? It's changing my project structure. So there's a little, and that was always my pushback to you. Is like, I don't want to change my project structure because then it impacts everything upstream on my staging environment or production environment. And I don't got time for that. Like
you were hung up on that. You're like, I like it, but it moves my directories around.
It's not. It's not about that. I'm not like precious about that. It's that there's the potential for the site to have problems, and like I can't, like I have people that pay money every year, every month to have access to the content, and I take that seriously, so I try to protect.
And believe it or not, Ryan, I do the same thing. So I use Vite on some projects. But for instance, some of my existing plugins have a Webpack 5 build setup that I use to build it. And they're doing enough complicated JavaScript that I actually get the benefit from using that tooling. And I was tempted to move it over to Vite, but I'm just like, you know what? That's just ridiculous, you know? And it goes to what Matt Wilcox just said, which is there are benefits to leaving what works as is until there are reasons to move on. And I agree with that. So that's... And maybe everyone has a different threshold in terms of where that is, right? But I totally agree with that, man. Like, I looked at this and I'm like, you know what? Part of me would love to have this stuff running on Vite, but there's no big gain for me for doing that. So why would I do that? You know? And
you've been doing some converting of existing stuff over to build chain setup like Vite and Webpack with the new... Craft CMOS came out with the new demo projects.
Yep.
And you've been working on those. What have you been doing there? Given, I guess.
Go ahead.
No,
Go there,
I mean,
Ryan.
I don't know.
Go there, Ryan. You got that look on your face like you're about to hit me with something, so go there.
I can never tell if you're just trolling or if you just want to have those projects up and running in the new build tools. But anyway, what's your goal with that? I think it's cool. I think it's cool because it's another example of you basically creating something and basically just offering it up to everyone to use.
Okay, so I'm curious now. How would it be a troll?
Yeah, I ended with a compliment and you weren't expecting it.
I did. I'm shocked. But how would it be a troll? This is I'm curious what your take on this. How would it be a troll? Explain that to me. I don't understand.
Well, because it's not it's a, I think you're very opinionated in terms of like using hand rolled, like single project Docker setups and not, other tools. So that's what I meant.
Maybe. I don't think it's really that, because I really do believe that Docker is an important and useful thing to learn, but I also really believe that lots of people just should never have to learn it. I firmly believe that a lot of people that are doing front-end development should never have to learn Docker. And there should be, and there already are, people are already working on layers to make that easier. There should be ways that the average person who wants to do front-end web development doesn't have to spend days getting a Docker setup working or just right, or even understand Docker at all, right?
Right.
And that's actually kind of part of the point in making projects like this, is to show people you don't have to know anything about Docker in order to use this thing, right?
Right.
So the impetus for doing it actually was that the sites came out from Pixel Tonic, and I think it's amazing that they ended up releasing it. And we were on one of the chats that Andrea runs on Twitter, the Twitter Spaces chat, and she was talking about the difficulties that she was having getting it up and running, because she wanted these things up and running locally. And Brandon Kelly was on there too, and I said, "Oh, well, maybe I'll do something with it, And I was kind of joking at the time. And then Andrea was asking me more about it, and then a couple other people were having issues getting stuff up and running. I'm like, you know what? Let me just try it. I've done these kinds of conversions before. Let's see what it ends up taking in order to do this. And it really wasn't bad. And so the benefit of it, I think, is that there's an example where there's a before and an after, right? So you can look at what the project from Pixel and Tonic was, and then you can look at what I transformed it into in order to make this thing work. But more importantly, I think, is that you can get this up and running locally so easily. Like, you pull the repo down and you type make dev and you're done. Like, you don't have to do anything. There's no setup, there's no questionnaire, there's no configuration, there's nothing. Like, you just do that and it works. And I think that this is a very powerful way to package up prefab sites. So for instance, I don't know if anyone remembers, but a number of years ago, Brandon Kelly did some kind of a workshop at one of the .all conferences, and a huge chunk of the conference time was spent getting everyone's local development and environment set up and working properly. So just so that the conference could happen, right? Because some people were on Valet, and this is pre-Nitro, so no one was using that. But some people were using Homestead, some people had nothing set up, and it was just a huge chunk of what they were doing was spending time getting everything worked out there. And this is where a containerized setup is so wonderful, because someone that knows how to build the setup can shrink wrap the project with just the DevOps that it needs, and then everyone can consume it, and they have to know nothing about it, Ryan. They have to know nothing about it. They just need Docker installed, type make dev or whatever command you end up doing, and it's up and running. And I thought that was really compelling for things like that, for like a demo site where you want someone to be able to run it and you don't want them to get hung up in the nonsense of having to get it up and running. And I also had a conversation with Ben Croker about this. He's doing a presentation at .all on web performance. And I'm like, man, you should totally just take your example and containerize it so that you just you have people do 2 steps: get clone, make dev, done. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And then you can spend the session And you ever have that when you're talking to someone and you know, or you firmly believe that what you're telling them is a good idea, but you know they're not going to do it at all. Like they're just never going to do it.
That's probably a lot of your conversations with me is how you feel.
I don't know. But I was talking to Ben, and he, Ben is he's a very nice, cordial person, and so he was he's agreeing this, that, and the other thing. But the whole time I was talking to him about it, I'm like, he's not going to do it. He's just never going to do it. And I even offered, I'm like, I will do it for you, Ben. I will do it, but he's not going to do it. I know he's not going to do it, and it may not be even if he thinks it's a good idea. I think he might not do it just because Pixel Tonic is probably going to want people to use Nitro to get stuff up and running, which is what it is. But so yeah, I spent time on getting those things up and running so that people who had issues getting the demo running could do that. They could easily just get it up and running, and. Ben Croker says, "Never say never." I don't know, Ben. I'm pretty sure. I'm good with. I'm totally good with.
You're challenging it now.
No, it's fine. Like it totally makes sense. Like if you don't want to do it, don't do it. I get it. I just think it would save a lot of time. I think. I realize it's not maybe not on brand, but it's going to let you focus on the conference and what you're doing. But anyway, the point is that people can pull these things down. And they can spin it up easily, right? So it's great. No matter what environment they're used to running it in, they can do that. And the other thing is that it lets people see. So for instance, one was coming, the original Spoken Chain was using a Webpack 4 config that was very similar to the one I published a couple of years ago. And I modernized that to use Vite. And so people can see what the transition looks like coming from Webpack to Vite. And it's amazing. Like it goes from like, all of these config files everywhere to this one little config file, and everything works.
Yeah.
And it lets people try Vite out with the hot module reloading and all that kind of stuff. And then I just converted over the Europa site, which I wasn't. I
the
probably
commerce site, right?
Europa is not the commerce; it's their marketing site.
Oh, it's their marketing site. That's right.
Yeah. And originally I started converting that over to Vite, but I actually ran into some problems. And it made me realize when I would choose Webpack and when I would choose Vite, which is something that a number of people have asked me about. For most new projects, I think I would probably choose Vite if I was choosing to work on them. And you can have a nice opportunity to modernize them. Like you ran into that with what you were doing. Tell everyone about what you ran into with Axios in your conversion over.
Oh yeah. So you know more about this than I do, so correct me if I'm wrong, but the standard Axios package from NPM does not support, it's not an ES6 module? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Can you,
it's not an ES module.
An ES module, so it wouldn't work. And then you had to get another one, like use a different one.
Yep.
And that's when I think you said it, I was thinking at the same time, I was like, okay, this, to me, just in my experience, this is a sign of you maybe need to rethink the approach, because now I'm kind of going down a side like game trail when I should be staying on the main trail.
Yep.
And so of course, like, why don't I just use fetch? And that requires 0 packages.
There you go.
And so that's what I ended up doing. And it ended up being in a video lesson that I released this week. Which that code runs on the site too, on GraphQuest, but that I just end up using fetch, and it's actually a way better approach. Keeps things simple, keeps things native, rather than dealing with like this extra package. But yeah, so there was some trade-offs there. So I could see if I had a ton of packages that I was dealing with, and they weren't capable of working with something like Vite, then there's probably going to be some refactoring that ought to happen.
Yeah.
But fortunately, I wasn't doing anything that sophisticated. So other than that, I think I have a clear road ahead of me.
And it's funny because Axios is, and so Andrea is saying that she just got the Europa Museum up and running, which is fantastic.
Nice.
I'm glad that was easy for you to get up and running. It's funny because Axios is such a popular little library, but it's actually kind of antiquated in that
totally antiquated.
It's a common JS is the way that it's written. And basically the long and the short of this is once upon a time there was JavaScript, and there was no importing of other scripts or any kind of nonsense like that. Then along came Node, and Node established its own mechanism for importing other JavaScripts called CommonJS. And it has a different way that it exports things and a different way that it imports things. And then it took years before the browsers kind of standardized on ESM, which is the ES module loader spec, and how that's going to work from an import-export perspective, right? Mm-hmm. And Vite is intentionally trying to push the ecosystem forward into modernizing things so that everything is using the ESM standard. So you're going to have a much easier time using Vite if the JavaScript that you're using is modern and the packages that you're using are modern. And that's an intentional choice. There are ways around that. There's a CommonJS plugin that you can use with it so that you can shim things and you can bring in older things. The recommendations that I got from a number of people in the Vite community around your issue specifically, but then also generally around this problem, is to look at it as an opportunity. And to look at it as an opportunity, not just to modernize the tooling that you're using, but also the code base that you're building it on. So they gave me a number of alternatives that you can use instead of Axios, one of which is just the Fetch API. Like, you can totally just do that. Yeah.
Just use Fetch.
Yeah.
And I know the reason people didn't use it prior is because it wasn't widely supported, but I'm pretty sure it is. Yeah. My market for the people that come to my site is different than just general.
If anyone's coming to your site on IE11, like, God help them. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Or, although maybe they're the people that need to be there. But it reminds me. So like I could have said, all right, I'm just gonna use like this other Axios package. It's gonna let me keep using Axios, and I'm just gonna kind of do this like interim solution to kind of get me there. And it reminds me of, I put this in the notes of this essay that I read this morning. I've been having like back issues, so I was laying on the floor behind me on my yoga mat reading this morning to try to relax my back. But there's this, have you ever heard of this book, Andrew, called 97 Things Every Programmer Should Know? It's from O'Reilly. I'm sure you know all of the things in here, but it's a series of essays. It's a series of essays by mostly a bunch of white guys with beards and ponytails, but anyway, these are just, like well-known programmers. But anyway, but there's this one called The Longevity of Interim Solutions. And it really struck me because I feel like I deal with this a lot when I'm working on my own projects, which is that I'm going to create an interim solution for something because there's an immediate problem that I need to solve.
Yep.
And I'm going to drop that in. And we see that not just in our own project, we see it in client work, especially because typically you're limited by time and budget. And so you can't, build X, Y, and Z thing the ideal way if there was no constraints, because you have constraints. So anyway, but it was interesting take because the essay was just about like kind of coming to terms with interim solutions and just understanding them rationally rather than in a judgmental way, which is that we all create interim solutions as we're working through stuff, and we just have to see them for what they are. There's an immediate problem that you have to solve, and we're trying to solve that. They typically, the reason they're considered interim is because they don't typically adhere to some standard that the project has. Like in my case with that package, like it basically adds additional complexity where I'm in the process of trying to simplify how I do things.
Well, Ben Croker says that was a very good, if long-winded explanation, Ryan. I think that's what he said. Maybe I misread it.
But he's talking about you, probably.
Yeah, probably is talking about me. But no, I agree with that. Like, look, I mean, if you want to get metaphysical about it, Ryan, we're all interim solutions. Like you and I are an interim solution on this planet. You know what I'm saying? Like,
we're the interim solution to the future carbon back into the earth. So, but I guess it was interesting to me because, like, if you've ever worked on a team or you've worked on a project, you've picked up a project that someone else worked on, and you see that there's a series of interim solutions that people did, like the initial response is always to be judgmental and say, oh, like, why did they do it that way? Like, they obviously didn't do it the proper way, but people were always working within a set of constraints. And
but Ben is clarifying he was talking about the book. We know, Ben. I'm just messing around. Go ahead, Ryan.
But anyway, but the idea is that an interim solution the reason that interim solutions exist is because they actually transform into being permanent solutions. Because at some point, those interim solutions just gain acceptance. Like you do it all the time. You're going through your code. You're like, oh, like I remember when I just kind of like hacked together those 3 lines to get this thing done, but I really should break that out into its own method. I should do this. I should do that. But you slowly start to accept it. Like it slowly becomes normal. And that's why, and this is what the author is arguing, is that's why interim solutions like are around. And that's why we see them so much in our code. And that's
I thought interim solutions were around just because people were lazy or on deadlines.
well, yeah, but I'm talking about why do we never go back and refactor those or do those the proper way? Is because they've gained acceptance. They've become the accepted way to do things, and you see it enough, and you're like, oh, yeah.
I think it goes back to step 1, time and money.
Right.
But here's the other thing, though, Ryan. Like, when we're building websites, we are kind of building temporary housing anyway. I mean, these things tend to get bulldozed pretty often.
Totally.
But I think this is actually a good time or a good point that we can circle back to is the idea of meta work. And we've talked about meta work versus actual work and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. I think where you get the payoff from the meta work is that it's true that every project has budgetary and time constraints, right? So you can't build something perfect, like you're saying. But I think when you invest some time into the meta work to where you've got a platform that elevates you and brings you up, I think that you are able to spend more time on the problem that matters, and you're able to deliver better, more complete solutions for your clients. I mean, that to me is the end goal, right?
Yep, I totally agree. And that's kind of what I discovered in working on my own project, was that I had to then now put some time into that meta work and say, I have to go do that because it's going to unlock my ability to do these other things. And that's like, I would never do it for this, just for the sake of doing it. Like it has to unlock something for me. But that's also a different, like I also have a little bit of a different math that I'm trying to play out here, in that I'm a single person working on this project, and I'm the bottleneck for everything. And so I have to be very careful about how my time is being used.
Oh, and you brought out your wife's pet name for you. That's cute. She calls you my little bottleneck, right? Doesn't she? Sorry,
awkward.
Sorry,
Anyway, looks like you're giving Docker support here in the chat.
Yeah.
So anyway, but anyway, if anyone ever wants a good book of essays to read, I actually really like it. I know Ben had told me that he likes it too, but it's 97 Things Every Programmer Should Know.
Yeah.
I want to say it's kind of old, at least, unless the people in here just look dated. 2010. So that's
2010.
That's 11 years old.
That's, I mean, to me, like instantly, I was like, oh, that's recent, but that's actually like a lifetime ago. In the development world, that's a lifetime ago, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But good stuff in here. Good reads. So I would recommend that. But that's one that I saw this morning that I thought was interesting.
Yeah, but and Matt Wilcox is saying that's I think he was commenting on what I was saying about the meta work thing. That's why people build their own craft base, and yeah, I mean that's why you do it, but that's why we adopt these tools to begin with, right? The idea is that the payoff is down the road. Now, That's always moving, okay? Like we're never going to get to nirvana. And you have to decide the balance in terms of where you want that to be, in terms of investing in building on the stuff that brings you up versus building the actual project. And that's why a lot of people, I know that Patrick Harrington and Jonathan Melville, they're two people that are on the devMode show pretty often. They have both moved over to Nuxt as a framework that they're going to use. And they're doing that so that it raises the tides so that their boat is lifted up in terms of the problem that they have to solve. Yeah.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. I think you have to be judicious about where you apply your time to do custom things versus leveraging the tools. And for me, on my project, it's about like, there's plenty of places where I need to apply my time in terms of, I do a lot of like integration stuff on the back end that no one sees. And that's where I have to apply my time because it smooths a lot of the bumps in the process there. Whereas like the reason I haven't done any of like the Docker stuff is because I didn't want to come up with my own setup on my own. It wouldn't provide enough value.
Yeah, I agree.
To the overall business.
I think that's the case for most people.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned earlier that I think everyone should be on their own little Docker setup. And I don't think that's true. Like, I don't really believe that. I think most people shouldn't learn it and shouldn't need to learn it. But I think that it is true that some people might want to create that so that other people can consume it easily. And there are front-end solutions to making it easier to work with Docker. DDev, I think, is one of the best ones, I think, out there. DDev is fantastic.
DDev is nice.
Yeah. It's very easy to work with. Lando is another one that's very good and is very easy to work with. And they're both flexible enough that you'll be able to do all of the stuff that you want to do, like hot module replacement and reloading and all that kind of stuff. You know, just something to look at if you're interested in going that route with your development environment. So no, I don't think people should have to learn Docker. I think people should maybe look at what it's like to consume Docker and some of the benefits you can get out of that. But you don't need to know it. I mean, you don't need to know how your car works to put your ass in it and drive yourself to the grocery store. You know what I mean? Like you just shouldn't have to do that for everything. I don't think we could get anywhere if that were the case, you know?
Right, but we feel like we have to. Like that's sort of like some sort of like thing that we have to do. We always have to know how everything works.
Yeah, but you can't.
I run into problems at home with this sometimes with like, oh, I'm going to fix that.
Yeah.
Like, and then next thing I know, there's crap everywhere and the thing still doesn't work. And I have two people looking at me like, why did you ruin this? So yeah, totally. Like the dead tree in my front yard that I need to have cut down.
Listen, man, I'm practical about this stuff. I know what I'm good at, and other things I just call people and have them do it for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with that. It doesn't bother me. I don't know.
Same.
But I want to talk to you about advertising. So I'm gonna get.
Yeah, it's specialty.
Yeah. I am gonna get personal about this. So, do you do any advertising with CraftQuest?
As in, do I take ads or do I buy ads? Which one?
As in, do you buy ads to promote your stuff?
No.
Or do you do anything to promote your stuff?
I use email, social media, and I try to build really good stuff that people recommend to other people.
But no paid advertising. So what is the reason for that? Why have you never done, for instance, Twitter ads?
So I have, not for CraftQuest, but for my previous training site, I did, but the return on it wasn't great. And I actually met with somebody several years ago that was recommended to me by, I don't remember who recommended, but he's basically like a online marketing consultant. And so he basically gets budgets from companies and then figures out where to spend those on online ads and stuff.
Yep.
And I sat down with him and we had coffee and he kind of walked him through what I was doing. And he basically said, there's a point where, and like Twitter and Facebook, they won't ever tell you this. Like their consultants will get on the phone with you and teach you how to buy ads on their platform. But they won't ever tell you that you can't spend, at your size, you can't spend enough money because you don't have it to have an impact. to actually get like ROI.
Yep.
So he says, until you're at a certain point,
yep.
He said, you're basically, I mean, if you feel good, if it makes you feel good to spend the money, you can spend the money, but you're not really going to get any return.
Yep.
And honestly, like even in organic marketing on social media, just like not paid, but just by posting,
yep.
The return on that isn't that great either.
Yeah.
Email, if you have an email list of people that care about what you're doing and are interested in what you're doing, and if at some point they're not, they'll unsubscribe.
Yep.
That's the place to get in touch people with what you're doing. That's how I've had the most success out of any of the channels with email.
Okay,
sure.
So you're
but
doing...
I don't do any paid advertising.
Yeah, you're doing marketing.
I mean, I've sponsored, like, I've done like coffee break sponsorship at .all and stuff like that.
That's marketing.
But yeah, and I've done that, and that's partially about marketing. It's partially about just, that I've benefited greatly from craft and from the community, and that it's a bit of like giving back.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, so that's it. I think one year in Berlin, I dropped like a little branded lip balm into everybody's bag.
Clearly that's what's causing everyone to subscribe to CraftQuest. So
that's it. That's why
I've always been a product guy where, and it makes sense from my origins, like I think the product is the most important thing. You've got to build the product. Product's got to be good. The problem is that this isn't Field of Dreams. This isn't, if you build it, they will come kind of thing, because you often have lots and lots of competitors. Now, the dynamic in the craft market is a little bit different, because if you want to do craft development and you want video tutorials, you're literally the only person, right? So, there's some free stuff on YouTube, and we stream stuff sometimes, but realistically, you're the one that does it, right?
Andrews just said he still has the lip balm. Yeah, I feel like somebody might have 100 of them. I always thought it was Luke, but anyway, go ahead.
Oh my God. I hope Andrews comes up to you and puts that lip balm on, gives you a nice little kiss on the cheek. I hope he gives it to you.
Anytime, Andrews, you're welcome to do that.
But I guess my point is that the craft market for that, and also for me as a plugin developer, right? So there are venues that I could be advertising. I think advertising on Twitter for that, I don't know how good that's going to work, because one of the bottom lines for advertising is you first think about who you're trying to reach. Like, what is the demo of the person that you're trying to reach? Like, who are they? What do they do? And you kind of profile them and you figure that out, and then you work your way backwards and figure out how to get a hold of them, And I'm not so sure that the people that make the decisions on plugins for Craft CMS are going to necessarily be easy to reach on Twitter, in that if I haven't reached them already, because it's a small enough market, you know what I mean? It's got to be that subset of people that haven't heard of you already through the other things that you're doing, that will now hear of you through advertising. Or maybe they'll be convinced that you're for real because they see an ad or whatever.
But advertising is ultimately like buying access to people.
Yeah.
But the end result is you're still telling someone, like, what you're doing is telling them about what you have, what you've done, what you can do for them, whatever your message is.
Yeah.
And I would say that for sometimes it feels like that paid advertising feels like a shortcut to the ability to communicate, but you still, even if you're not doing paid advertising, you still have to be willing and able and like just have the initiative to share and tell people about what you're doing. Yeah. If you don't tell people what you're doing, no one's ever going to know.
Yeah.
And if you're doing paid ads, you're not always, depending on the platform, you're not always telling the people that care the most. You're telling people that the algorithm says you care the most. But if you have like going back to the email list, if you have an email list, and if you tell those people what you've done and what you're working on, what you've created, that's the best way to meet whatever your goal is, which is, have a certain amount of downloads, have a certain amount of installs, have a certain amount of subscribers. You have to keep telling people about what you're doing, because like when you're when you're like, let's say a developer of a plugin, to you, the plugin is your world. Like it is, and you are in the center of that. But to someone in, California who's doing client sites, like they don't think about your plugin every day, and they don't think about your plugin every hour. They might think about your plugin for 3.5 seconds when they come across it. And so you have to constantly let people know about what you're working on, because they won't remember it.
Yeah,
So,
and I think to your point,
you don't have to pay to do that.
To your point about the spend, it's true that if you don't have enough of a spend to make a difference, just save your money. Like there's no point.
Save your money.
But also, if the market that you're pitching to is very likely already heard of you, and they're small enough, you're also largely, not entirely, because there is something to be gained from confidence in the brand, and there's a reason why advertisers are just constantly hammering the same thing over and over again. But it's diminishing returns, I think, for someone like a plugin developer. I mean, I still think some advertising is okay. I've done some advertising on Craft Link List back when John Morton was running it. And, I think it can be useful in a product announcement, like if you have a new product, to spread the awareness of it, do what you can do. But in a small market, you're kind of paying to advertise to a market that's already saturated in terms of them knowing about you, most likely, if you have promoted yourself well enough. However, I do think that, so for instance, like a plugin developer like me, I think it would probably be neutral at best for most advertisements. It might be positive EV for a new product that has been introduced to do it. But I think for an organization like Craft CMS, I think their market is quite broad. Like there is a huge number of people out there that are potentially considering one environment or another to use for developing stuff. And I'm not saying that they should do this kind of advertising, but I'm just comparing and contrasting that the number of people out there that potentially could adopt Craft CMS that may not even know about it is huge compared to the number of people that are already using Craft CMS that may or may not have heard about one of my plugins or your stuff. Right. So the dynamics are totally different there.
Yep. Yeah, I don't want to just blast out paid advertising to people that don't know craft, because then I'm in the business of having to educate them on what craft is and all that. And that's not really an effective use of my time. So I would say, instead of paying to advertise, take that money, convert that into whatever your hourly rate is, if you have one, and then use that, save that money to pay yourself to build something new or work on your product or something like that, and build something that people will be interested in.
And this goes for agencies too, right? So when I search on anything craft, I see advertisements for Happy Cock.
Yeah, they have all the keywords.
You can search for anything, because they are probably paying a pretty penny to get that, right? But for them, it's broad enough that it probably is worthwhile for them to be doing that. And I've seen some other agencies pop up here and there that are doing it. But I think that if you were a freelancer, I don't know that it would make sense for you to do that, because to your point, you probably don't have the spend to make it worthwhile to even bother. And then even if you could land, even if you had the spend to do it, the amount of leads that you would get, you would never be able to satisfy if you're just a freelancer. Like what are you going to do,
And to add a little more color to the Happy Cock thing too, there is a whole side half of Happy Cock that is about paid marketing and stuff. That's they specialize in.
Right.
So they're already optimized to do those types of ads for themselves. So they're they're not blowing money. They're being very careful about it. Although even though it does seem like it. Yeah.
No, for sure. I'm not saying that they are not getting the return. I think they absolutely are.
No, I'm just saying
if they
weren't,
they wouldn't be doing it. Yeah.
Right. But they also are in the business of doing that exact work for clients, so they also know what they're doing. Where I don't, I've sat down and looked at these tools, and it just always seemed like a good way of losing $50 at a time.
Yeah. Well, and so I guess the point is that I think there are some cases where you probably would want to be advertising, like Pixel and Tonic probably should be and probably are advertising Craft CMS. And larger agencies like Happy Cog are advertising and buying keywords and doing all that kind of good stuff. But that doesn't necessarily scale, both in terms of the people that you're reaching and the segment that you're reaching, and also the amount of money that you can spend. It doesn't mean everybody should be doing it, right?
Right.
So at least for me, my experience has been fairly neutral, the advertising that I've done. And you can say, all right, Andrew, you just suck at advertising. And, that certainly could be true. But in a former life, we worked on products where we did have a big advertising spend, and it did make a big impact. And I learned quite a bit about marketing and how to effectively advertise things. I also learned that to some extent, I don't really enjoy that part of the stuff. I enjoy building stuff more than I do, marketing it. But anyway, it's just something I wanted to bring up, and I think that for me
to kind of wrap that up, Andrew, can I buy an ad on devMode on the devMode podcast? Is that possible?
No, currently you cannot buy an ad on the devMode podcast.
No, I mean me personally, I want to buy one. Am I able to?
No.
Can I sponsor devMode? Okay. All right,
well, I don't know. Maybe we'll talk money. If the money, hey, look, man. Ryan, if the money's good enough, we can talk. We can make it happen. Okay? If it's good, we can make it happen. Well, that about wraps it up for another episode of the devMode.fm podcast. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to subscribe, tell a friend, drop a review. We really appreciate it. Join us here for the live streams. You can ask questions and we can interact with you a little bit. For the devMode.fm podcast, I'm Andrew Welch.
And I'm Ryan Irelan.
All right. And we will let this go for a minute. Imagine music is playing. Dun, 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 dun. Right?
Yeah, you didn't do the music.
I didn't do the music.
Did you write that song?
I did not write that song. And I'm once again flabbergasted by you not being aware of Rage Against the Machine and Bomb Track. It's killing me. It's killing me, Ryan.
I thought everybody wrote their own theme songs.
Well, no, we don't want to get strikes. That's why we don't write our own theme songs. If you
How
write
can
your
get a
own
strike
material,
for a
you
song
get.
that
If you write your own material, you get copyright strikes. I mean, come on, man.
Right. Thanks for joining us, Matt.
Bye-bye, Matt. Bye, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. And